How far along in the trial was this before he decided to do that?
We had taken the start of the trial on Monday, and we had already selected a jury. That went through Monday evening and resumed Tuesday morning. We had gone through, I believe, 3 witnesses. We had played his taped statement taken by Deputy Chief Darren Barclay, and we had put on the witness, Sergeant Kenneth Johnson, who was the victim of the crime. Sergeant Johnson had testified first, and we played his dash cam video, which had made the news previously, and we feel like that had a tremendous impact on the jury and the defendant when he saw the jury's reaction to the video and to the statement. That made a tremendous impact. So once we got through the statement and the video, it was after the lunch hour that he came back. His attorneys came and told me that he wanted to change his plea and enter a plea of guilty.
I can imagine there was much celebration there.
There was. Yes, ma'am.
Let's go back and talk about what happened that led up to the trial.
From the beginning, when the case came to our office, the DA packet made it to us pretty quickly, and the video made it very quickly. It was something that the Bossier City Police Department took very seriously. It was one of theirs that was a victim here, and we had a couple, I believe 2 to 3 pre-trial hearings. We had to go through a preliminary examination. They filed a pleading stating that they didn't believe that there was probable cause for Mr. Wertham to be held. And when we introduced the portions of the dash cam video, the judge immediately believed there to be probable cause, ordered Mr. Wertham to remain in custody of the sheriff, and ordered that he be held pending his trial. And I do not recall if there was a bond reduction hearing, but I do know that I conducted that preliminary examination hearing myself, along with the officers. Certain officers came and testified.
Was Sergeant Johnson the only one at the scene when all of this happened?
Yes, ma'am. Sergeant Johnson had witnessed he was headed southbound on Barksdale Boulevard and noticed a suspicious vehicle, a white Chevy Camaro, headed out of the entrance of Barksdale Air Force Base, and it was stopped there. Sergeant Johnson was stopped at the red light, and he let it cycle through a few times and noticed the Camaro was not moving, and that's what prompted him to turn and initiate contact with the driver. He first got the driver out of the vehicle and smelled the odor of burnt marijuana, asked the driver if there was a passenger in the car. He indicated there was, and Sergeant Johnson patted the driver down for weapons. He walks to the driver's side of the automobile and peers in with his flashlight, and he can see marijuana in the passenger's lap. Now, the passenger's Mr. Malik Wortham. Sergeant Johnson, as he makes his way around the rear of the Camaro, calls on his radio for an additional unit because now he believes there may be narcotics on scene. And when he begins talking to Mr. Wertham, he tilts his flashlight to check the back seat of the car, and that's when Mr. Wertham produces the firearm. And during the trial, certainly the state asked why he left Mr. Wertham in the car, and since Sergeant Johnson's testimony was that he was out there by himself. He didn't have a partner, and when he had the driver already out of the vehicle, he felt at that time safer having one person contained in the vehicle and one out. He didn't want to, in his words, he didn't want to tangle with two if something erupted, a fight or a foot chase or anything like that happened. He only wanted one individual out of the car. Of course, that didn't matter because Mr. Wertham, of course, then produces the firearm.
I understand that the gun jammed when he tried to fire it. Was that accurate?
He did not have a round properly loaded in the chamber. That is correct. He did try to fire the firearm at least one time. It looks like he tried to fire it again on the video. Sergeant Johnson says that when the gun was placed, his testimony was 4 to 6 inches from his face, and he heard the click from the dry fire of the firearm, and he immediately attempted kind of evasive maneuvers. He tried to make separation from the defendant's gun. And on the video, what Sgt. Johnson didn't remember until he saw the video for himself, because he hasn't been watching it. This has been very, very traumatic for him. He's a husband and has a 10-year-old son. So this is something he doesn't want to relive over and over again. So he watched the video for the first time with me, and he did not remember the firearm coming out a second time. But it does come out on the video. It comes out the first time and is in Sgt. Johnson's face, and you can see the defendant has got it right up next to his face. And when Sgt. Johnson tries to step back, he slaps the firearm. Mr. Wertham pulls it back in the car, and before Sgt. Johnson can really do anything else, Mr. Wertham sticks the gun back out again and aims it at him. But again, the testimony, or rather the statements given by the defendant and the driver was Mr. Nathan Birdwell. Both of them gave statements to police that they've been driving around all day long smoking marijuana. And so he just didn't have the slide on the firearm. It was a semi-automatic Raven MP25 chrome-plated pistol. He didn't pull the slide back all the way and load around in the chamber. So he did try to shoot it. You can see it's obvious on the video he's trying to shoot it. And when Sgt. Johnson makes enough distance, he can pull his service weapon, and he fires 3 shots. One enters the hood of the vehicle, the second shot, the door of the vehicle, and I believe the third shot, it actually hits the weather stripping of the passenger side window, separates into 3 pieces. 2 of them go into the headrest of the passenger seat, and 1 fragment hits Mr. Wertham in the back of the head, ricochets off his skull, never penetrates the skull, goes around and lodges between the tissue on his forehead. So he was treated by Bossier City Fire Department on the scene. He was able to walk around and talk. He apologized on the scene to Sgt. Johnson just briefly. He said, I'm sorry, man, or man, I'm sorry, were his words. And then Sgt. Johnson was put on administrative leave due to the officer-involved shooting.